I remember vividly, there's a story where we tried to hire a game producer and he asked, how can Sandbox beat Sony or Nintendo or any big VR players in the United States? And of course, coming from a Hong Kong company where we never seen success in Hong Kong at that scale, that was a very valid question. I always believed that in order to make a big change, you have to have a direction that's uniquely different. We believe that what we are building is something that no one else in the world is doing right now. I put all the money into the company, and then in 6 months' time, we built the technology infrastructure. At that time, it was what we call the winter of VR. Us trying to raise in 2017 was essentially impossible. So we had just 2 months of runway left, and then I really wanted to build, this physical space in VR. None of the investor came in. One of the biggest feedback that we've gotten is like, well, this works in Hong Kong, it could work in Asia, but this probably would not work in the US. That kind of pissed me off. So I thought, okay, you know what? We're gonna bring this to the US. And we decided to open in San Mateo in the heart of Silicon Valley. This is our flagship store. We're able to share this with the world. And of course, we're ready for the next stage, which is get to Series B. But a couple months later, the whole world shut down. My name is Steven Zhao. I am the founder and CEO of Sandbox VR. So what we do is we provide full body VR experiences for friends to play together in our retail spaces. So we create our own technology that enables that. We also create our own content, and we both open our own locations and franchise them out. Today we have 47 locations, so we grew pretty quickly. We have 8 pieces of title, not just original IP. We're also working with Netflix. So Squidgame is in Sandbox. Rebel Moon is going to come out later this year. We hope to continue the partnership with them and other IP holders. So I grew up in San Francisco. As a child, I spent a lot of time pretty much alone, just like do a lot of reading, sometimes playing games. And part of it is the immigrant stories. Both my parents immigrated here when I was a child, and they work long nights. So I have a lot of time to myself, just kind of doing my own things. But luckily, at a young age, my parents got a computer. And then I really started to kind of figure out how to use that machine. And one day my friend showed me a game creation software, which I put into the computer, and I started making games, and it started becoming a hobby of mine. So since 12 years old, I've been building games. So I studied in UCSD, University of California, San Diego, in electrical engineering. After college, I moved to Hong Kong to build a gaming studio called Blue Tea Games, where we made PC and mobile games. We grew from 2 people to 40 people. It was pretty successful for a time. And during that period, PC was pretty hot. People downloaded the game on the computers. But the shift to mobile created like a brand new way of playing experience. And for me personally, I didn't adapt fast enough. I was late to the mobile space. And because of that, when we transitioned to mobile, we didn't catch up and weren't able to create games that was able to be successful. So that was a pretty big learning for us, is always look at what is trending in terms of technology and how do you build for that future. So when you build a game, it's important to not build what is popular today, because by the time you finish, you'll be 9 months too late. What is going to be popular 1 to 2 years down the line? From my first startup at Blue Tea, we failed to do that and we weren't able to scale. And it was around 2015, we saw that VR was becoming very hot. So we decided, it's like, hey, why don't we take our learning as a game developer and bring it to a whole new medium, double down on VR. And then we decided to do that with a brand new company. So that was essentially how Sandbox was formed. So when we started the company, we were like doing 2 things. Number one, we were building games on the VR consumer market. A part of us also took our learning back at Blue Tea, which was you always want to build for the future. What do people want 2, 5, 10 years in the future? And we felt like the consumer VR headset itself wasn't enough. We want to be fully immersed. We want to be able to interact closely with friends. And to us, like, I grew up watching The Matrix. It's like, hey, do we have the technology to actually create The Matrix? And then we look backwards like, hey, we do. So we did a regular consumer game and we basically iterated on what The Matrix looked like. Come the end of 2016, we launched a consumer game. It was like a top 10% best-selling game, but the market just wasn't there. Like we weren't able to make enough revenue to keep the company going. So at the end of 2016, like all our bet was putting into building this other project, which is basically, it's now Sandbox VR, location-based VR experiences for a group of friends to play together. But for us, that was our pivot. At that time, it was what we call the winter of VR. The Christmas sales didn't live up. People thought the hype of VR. Us trying to raise in 2017 was essentially impossible. So we had just 2 months of runway left. And then I really wanted to build, this physical space in VR. None of the investors came in. One of them investor would ask us, well, you're just a team of 6 people. We didn't have a big team. So that was one big challenge we had. The second challenge we had was we were not located in the US. There's a geography challenge. Our team is based in Hong Kong, and it comes to a certain type of perception, but really you're not in the dominant market. How do we know that this is something that can work in a different country? So for us, we have to build our technology, build our content, and build our retail location. So there's not a lot of money to come around. We have to be very resource creative. And, for us is how do we use technology to solve something that can be replaced by using a lot of hardware? So for instance, in order to do full body tracking, you need a lot of cameras, but each camera were very expensive. So we spent a lot of time figuring out how to use software to minimize the amount of cameras. And this turns out to be a blessing because it was very important later down the road as we scale that every location will be as low cost as possible. Another challenge we had was in terms of being resource constrained. We try to figure out how to, get people to come to our location. One of the hardest thing is marketing our business. As a small company, you don't have a big marketing budget. So we had to be very creative. Like, how do we get people to come? So we decided that, hey, why don't we productize it? Why don't we make it so that we create a software video that after you come and play, we'll give it to you. And this video is going to be capture the most embarrassing and funny moment of you playing with your friends. And then you can easily share on social media. And when we created that, every customer that comes in start putting it on social media, and it generated an insane word of mouth. So that taught us 2 important things. Number one is every problem is looking really deeply into it, after really analyzing it. There's probably a creative way to solve it with less resource, but also to get a much better outcome. And the other thing that we've learned is it's not only important to just build a product, but it's also really important to build a distribution strategy for that product. So at that time, I took all the money I had and I put it into Sandbox. And then in 6 months' time, we built the technology infrastructure and we opened a really small shop in Hong Kong. And I remember vividly, there's a story where we tried to hire a game producer and he asked, how can Sandbox beat Sony or Nintendo or any big VR players in the United States? And of course, coming from a Hong Kong company where we never seen success in Hong Kong at that scale, that was a very valid question. And what I told him was, I always believed that in order to make a big change, you have to have a direction that's uniquely different. And for us, we believe that what we are building is something that no one else in the world is doing right now. The moment we felt like we had product market fit was during a test run before we even launched the product. My friends came and played, and within experience, they were screaming and yelling and so loud to the point that the neighbors came knocking on our door saying, hey, is everything all right? We didn't know the type of visceral reaction that customer would get. And we felt like that visceral reaction is something that has never been done before. And we're like, okay, there's probably something there. So after we got then product market fit in our one Hong Kong location, we got funded by Gobi Alibaba. That allowed us to really build our location, to really fine-tune our unit economics, to restart franchising. And at that time, things were going well, but one of the biggest feedback that we've gotten is well, this works in Hong Kong, it could work in Asia, but this probably would not work in the US. That kind of pissed me off. So I thought, okay, you know what? We're gonna bring this to the US. And we decided to open in San Mateo in the heart of Silicon Valley. We put the location there and people came and played. Many of the people there, if not all of them, it was wow, we never experienced anything like this before. And pretty soon, I remember Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, they came and tried it out, the partners did. And they're yeah, this is really awesome. We're gonna bet on you. And that became my Series A. And the funding was able to allow us to really scale out the business and open about 9 locations across the US. And I remember we're sitting here in the San Francisco downtown location. This was at December 2019. We're very excited. This is our flagship store. We're able to share this with the world. And of course, we're ready for the next stage, which is get to Series B. But a couple months later, the whole world shut down.
We have a new name for the coronavirus. The World Health Organization has officially called it COVID-19.
Around March, April 2020, when the pandemic hit, all the stores that we had to close right away. And we didn't know how long this was going to last. I thought it was like a funny joke. It's already really hard to run a startup. and it's really hard to run a retail startup. The first thing we did as a company, which unfortunately was we had to downsize. It was pretty dramatic. We lost about 80% of our team, and you can imagine morale was like at all-time low. And the people that stayed, like in the months following that, a good amount of them left as well. So it was really number one we had to do was keeping the team motivated, kind of having that vision of like, hey, we can survive COVID. What does this mean for Sandbox? What does this mean for us? And it's just repeating that message and just kind of like being a cheerleader and be like, hey, we can fight through this. You know, this is one of the biggest tests for any of us. It's a tough story, something that you'll be proud about, even if you fail. And that's what we wanted to set, was having that really strong story of the future. And the last part is we had to go through Chapter 11 bankruptcy, because as a retail business, we have a lot of leases and there's no way to get out of the leases at that time. So we had to go through Chapter 11 to get an emergency and work through with our landlord to figure out how do we survive out of this. That was just a lot of collaboration with people that we owe money to. We work with different lawyers across different groups. But during that period, we also took the opportunity to really fine-tune our business, like to the minor details. Like, how can we build the most economically strong retail that we can, you know, in terms of how do we improve our technology, our operations, our content, so that when we do reopen back up again, not only will we have a very strong, people will come back in drove, but we'll also have very strong profit margin, because that's what we need to come out of this. And around that same time, in 2021, is kind of when the world started to open up again, especially for our stores in California. And the moment they did, people came back in drove. I remember there was an incident where the mall was completely empty, but 100% of customers booked ahead online. We had to wait for customers in the parking lot to guide them inside the empty mall to our store. And we've been seeing that across all the locations. And very soon, the locations are filled up. Customers are happy to have a place where they can share with their friends and family. And then we're able to take that traction to open more locations by working with landlords who can fund us. By grabbing those traction, we're able to kind of paint, hey, this is how Sandbox is going to look in the next few years. And fortunately, we started fundraising again. They've seen our progress. They know everything that we've been through. They're like, okay, you guys survived the worst. Future looks bright. We're going to back you. And they did our Series B. So after we got a Series B funding in 2021, we had about maybe 13 locations. Today, we have 47 locations, so we grew pretty quickly. We see Sandbox VR as pretty much like the new movies. This is something where we believe that people will go out for. They will go with their friends and family and colleagues. Instead of just watching it on a screen, you get to live in it, embody it. It's a very social experience that you really get to share, and it creates a lot of team bonding moments. For us is how do we create a repertoire of amazing experiences, you know, on a regular cadence to get people to come back again and again? And how do we continue to open up more locations so that we can have a Sandbox in every neighborhood? And our strategy for that is to continue to build up our franchising, because the more locations we have, the more we can reinvest back into our technology, into building better and bigger content to have more content, which in turn will help create more demand. And with more demand, we can have more locations and go from there. So the next big thing for Sandbox is two-pronged, is how do we build better content, and that's just a very iterative process, but also just working with strong IP holders to bring their world into Sandbox in a really organic way that works best for our platform. What I see in 10 years is you have what you get at home consumer VR that gets better over time, the headsets gets lighter, better quality experiences. That's something that you would likely just do, you know, multiplayer, and you can play on hours on end. And then for us, out of location is in 10 years time, having thousands of locations, one in your neighborhood where you have a reason to go out and play with your friends.